Hello, and welcome to something a little different for me. Today, we're going to be talking about Slay the Spire. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the Ironclad. The reason I'm doing this video is because I just last night finished my first ever Ascension 20 run of the Ironclad. And, I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience with it. Talk a little bit generally about Slay the Spire, which is a game that has really come on as one of my favorites ever since I started playing it a couple months ago. And just I thought it'd be fun to give my opinion on just how the Ironclad works, how the cards work, um, and just talk about my experiences with them. So yeah, it's a little bit something different, but since I just finished the whole 1 to 20 climb with Ironclad, um, I just thought it might be kind of interesting to give some opinions about it. All right. So I believe all of these cards are up to date with current patch. I saw some other tier lists where they weren't all up to date, but I believe all of these are. So without further ado, let's get into it. Um, First up, we have Anger. Now, I think that this is a pretty good starting point because I think that Anger is very emblematic of, I guess you could call it a conundrum with the Ironclad, which is that um Ironclad has a lot of cards that are very useful in the early game, but don't really scale very well at all into the mid to late game and end up at times being a little bit of an albatross. And I think that Anger fits that bill a little bit. It's definitely useful early. Having just a quick 0 cost 6 damage is really nice against enemies with low HP. Um, but as your deck starts to fill up a little bit more and you're trying to pare it down and you're trying to draw your really good cards more often, it kind of ends up filling your deck a little bit more than you want it to. Um, by virtue of the fact that a copy of it gets put into your discard pile every time you play it. So it's in kind of an awkward spot. I think I'm gonna put it in B tier. I can't put it any lower than that because I have had some really fun runs with it. Like I remember I had, one run where I had like Shuriken or Kunai or one of those type of relics, and I had Spinning Top, which makes it so that you always draw a new card every time you draw your last one. Um, and I remember I played like 12 Angers in a row to beat the final boss, and that was really fun. So yeah, not always a great card late game, but early game it's fine. Next, we've got Armaments. Now, this is a classic case of a card that desperately needs an upgrade to make it useful. However, the upgrade is so ridiculously powerful that I almost always get it. The 5 block by itself is just nothing, obviously, but like the ability to just make all of your cards better is so incredibly valuable, that I'm gonna put it in B. This card goes absolutely crazy with things like Runic Pyramid, um, or if you just have the ability to get a lot of cards in your hand with things like Offering, it's just really, really amazing, assuming you don't have, an upgraded Apotheosis in the deck. So unupgraded, it's like a D tier, but because the upgrade is so powerful, I'm gonna put it in B tier. Barricade. So this is an interesting one because it is so clearly run defining if you get it at the right time and are able to play it at the right time. And I feel like that is true across the board for Slay the Spire. Like none of these rankings are absolute. Cards are always context dependent and they can be good or bad depending on what your deck does, when you draw them, which enemies you're fighting, all that sort of thing. And that's one of the things that's great about this game. And it's one of the reasons why it resists a what you could call a true meta, because everything is so contextual. That said, Barricade, I'm gonna put up an A. Obviously, 3 costs is prohibitive early in the game. I tend not to take this unless I am in Act 2 or later. Um, you can upgrade it down to 2 costs, which I would almost always do. The thing is, if you are a block deck, and spoiler alert, I think block is the most important thing that Ironclad can do. It is obviously just completely game changing. Um, if you get the exhaust synergies with things like Feel No Pain, um, it's just it's absolutely crazy, and it can really just turn you into an absolute tank. Um, but yeah, I mean, there is absolutely downsides to it. It's not going to be for every deck. And it can just be dead weight in your deck if you take it too early or if you don't have cards that are able to synergize with it well. If you're not able to generate a lot of block, then it can be sort of bad. But because it is so incredibly powerful situationally, I do think you have to put it in there. And by the way, just to talk a little bit about how I'm evaluating these tiers, um, I'm just sort of thinking about them in terms of their usefulness broadly, you know. Like an S tier is going to be reserved for cards that are almost always going to be useful, and that I will generally just take every single time. Um, A is like a great card that maybe I won't take always. And then, B is sort of like it depends. C is a card that I usually won't take, but could theoretically be useful under certain circumstances. And D is like a pretty much never take for me. Um, with exceptions, because again, with this game, there are always exceptions to the rule. With that though, Battle Trance, easy S. Easiest S in the world. Um, yeah, it's just free card draw. I mean, how could you not love that? 0 cost, 3 cards, upgrades to 4 cards. I don't think there are very many decks that you could build that would not benefit immensely from this. I mean, just the chance to draw your better cards more often at 0 cost. It's a beautiful thing. I'll take it almost every single time. Um, I feel like every great deck I've ever has had Battle Trance for the Ironclad. And what do we have here? Berserk. This is a tough one. I really want to like it more than I do. Obviously, extra energy for the remainder of the fight is great. energy is incredibly valuable for the Ironclad in particular, um, because of things like Barricade, you know, Demon Form, things like that. A lot of the powerful cards are quite expensive, um, but too vulnerable is just really bad. I mean, if you can get it innate, like if you can get a bottle and just play it at the beginning of every single combat, then I could see it having some serious utility. But I very rarely feel good about getting it just because that is such a niche situation. So I'm gonna put it in C. Generally, there are better cards to take alongside it. If I end up with it, I'm not always mad about it because it can be useful, but yeah, just too vulnerable is just very tough. It's a pretty big downside. Speaking of downsides, Blood for Blood costs 4 energy, 1 less energy every time you lose HP. Um, so I feel like for hallway fights, this isn't great just because most of the time you're not going to be, fighting long enough. It's not going to come around enough into your hand for it to be really useful. But I think for boss fights, it's one of the most useful attacks in the game just because obviously you're going to be taking a lot of damage and you're going to be cycling through your deck quite a few times. So in a lot of situations, you'll end up in a place where this will literally cost 0. Which, if you can get like a dual wield, for example, or a double tap, get a little bit of strength going, you could really do some serious work with this. So early on, and in hallway fights, it's not great, but it's so powerful against some of the most powerful enemies in the game that I'm gonna put it up into A tier. I definitely think it is one of the best attack cards for the Ironclad. Bloodletting costs nothing. You gain 2 energy, upgraded 3 energy, I believe, at the cost of 3 HP. It's one of those cards with the Ironclad that really forces you to use your HP as a resource, which is a very interesting dimension to the Ironclad. Um, Differs from the other characters in that you gain back a certain amount of HP um, at the end of every fight, and yeah, I just feel like I'm rarely sad to have a bloodletting in my deck. Obviously, synergizes well with a card like Rupture down here, which gives you strength. Can be an interesting way to gain some strength. And 3 HP really isn't that much to sacrifice for the potential benefits of having 2 additional energy for that turn. So I feel like I have to put it in A tier. There's just the benefits just far outweigh the downside of losing 3 HP, in my opinion. Bludgeon, absolutely goated early card. Like, this is, if I get this, like, early in Act 1, I'm feeling really good, especially with an upgrade. You get an additional 10 damage to 42, which is enough to one-shot most of the common enemies in Act 1, and, can be really useful against, um, the bosses of Act 1 as well. And again, it's a card that, like I was talking about right off the bat, is great early, but um, is not so great once you get past Act 1, just because the flat damage um, isn't going to be as valuable as the different ways that you can get to scale your damage. And you just kind of have this big expensive card in your deck that isn't super playable all the time unless you end up with Snack OI or something like that. So I'm putting it in B. You know, for Act 1, it's an S. um, but, you know, as a whole, it's not always a card that I'm thrilled to have later in the game in Acts 2 and 3. So I'm gonna put it in B. Body Slam. Um I think it's the best attack card for Ironclad. And by the way, I'm not really ranking these within the tiers. I'm kind of just throwing them up there. Like I don't like armaments is not better than bludgeon necessarily to me. I'm not ranking them in that way. Um but yeah, I think Body Slam is insane for a couple of reasons. For one thing, you upgraded its zero cost, and if you have a block deck with something like Barricade, um, and Feel No Pain and Impervious and all these things that can really get your block up, you just do absolutely like stupid, silly amounts of damage with it, man. Like, I feel like most of the best runs I've had with the Ironclad have incorporated a zero cost body slam and oftentimes more than one. Um, yeah, just dealing damage equal to your block if you have a block deck is just insane. So, yeah, body slam is just one that um, I just will usually take. Um, if it's up against almost any other attack card, it's just really good. Um, Brutality, another good one. For zero energy, you start each turn losing 1 HP and drawing a card. Again, HP is a resource with the Ironclad. And while you don't want to have too many cards that are draining your HP necessarily, um, it's not the biggest deal in the world to lose 1 HP per turn, especially if you are gaining your max HP really high with things like feed. Um, yeah, and then just card draw. It's nothing major. Obviously, one card. I think it does upgrade to 2 cards with an upgrade. Um, but yeah, it's so just easy to play. Um, you know, card draw is always good, and I think it belongs in A. Burning Pact. Here's another A. Upgrades to exhaust 1 card, draw 3 cards. If you have an exhaust deck already, then this is going to be a great addition. Um, Exhaust is the defining feature of high level Ironclad play. It took me a while to sort of realize that because I think that a lot of new players, including myself, see exhaust as just sort of a flat penalty. But, it's an incredibly powerful mechanic for a lot of reasons. For one thing, it just allows you to get rid of your bad cards, thus allowing you to draw your good cards more often. And this just is a huge accelerant to that. So I probably won't necessarily take it early on if I don't already have the exhaust going. But later on it's incredibly useful. So love a burning pact. Hey, Carnage. Again, I pretty much just echo what I said about bludgeon. It's just a big attack that is really useful early on. 2 cost, 20 damage. I think it upgrades to I want to say 28 damage. Um, it's ethereal, which can be a little bit annoying, but generally speaking, early in the game, when you see it, you're gonna want to play it pretty much every time. Not the most useful later, yada yada yada. You get the deal. I mean, a lot of the Ironclad's attack cards are B tier. I just feel like the all of his most powerful cards, in my opinion, pretty much have some kind of block and exhaust synergy to them. And it's true that Ironclad, because it is ethereal, you can just let it exhaust and, gain some extra block with Feel No Pain or something like that. So I guess it's not like, it's maybe a little bit more useful than Bludgeon later on in the game, but yeah, it's a good damage card early when you don't have a lot of damage. But beyond that, it's not anything that I'm thrilled to have later on. Clash. Okay. Um, Yeah, this is just straight garbage, honestly. I mean, it's not horrifically bad if you get it early on. Um, but if you are past a certain ascension level and you have Ascender's Bane in your deck, it just becomes next to unplayable. I mean, obviously, it's so situational. You can only play it if everything is an attack. And it only does 14 damage, which isn't even like, it's just not enough. It's just not enough damage to make it even worth considering, really. It's like you just have to. Hang on, sorry, my cat's going crazy. So, um, anyways, so yeah, it's trash. Don't take it. Cleave, good AoE early on when you're facing a lot of enemies that, like the Gremlin hordes or the sentries or something like that. It's not incredible, but it's like good enough. Um, yeah, decent AoE. Don't mind it. Not super useful. But yeah, if you get your strength up, it can be good against some of the Act 2 enemies. And even, some of the elites and bosses later on. Clothesline, again, B. Being able to weaken enemies as just sort of like a sort of a block strategy is really good early. Very good against enemies that attack multiple times, like the Hexaghost, for example. But um, yeah, just not a card that scales amazingly well into the late game. Combust. Now, here's an interesting one. Um, this is yet another card that causes you to lose HP. And this is a solid one. This is a solid one. Obviously, with Rupture, which raises your strength again. Every time you lose HP from a card, getting one strength could be a nice way to just boost your damage a little bit. And that 5 damage, and I think it upgrades to 7 damage per turn, really adds up. It's a good card that I like to take if I'm really hurting for some AoE. Um, yeah, it's nice. It's not amazing, but it's nice. It's B tier. Corruption, oh yeah, it's S. I feel like most of the great decks that I've had with Ironclad have had corruption. Um, though I will say my successful Ascension 20 run did not use it, surprisingly. But yeah, this is a card that if I see it, I pretty much just always take it because um, even though it's 3 cost, you can use it and then just immediately play any of the skills in your hand because they cost 0. They exhaust, and if you get Feel No Pain, Dark Embrace, things like that, it's just gonna really do a lot for you, okay? And just being able to put a block at no cost and just play all of your attacks is insane, especially on hallway fights that are shorter. You could just play it right at the beginning. If you're able to get it innate into your hand, it's just so, so, so good. Um, on boss fights, um, you might not want to play it right away, because you could end up in a situation where you've just exhausted all your skills and you're just not putting up any kind of block. That has happened to me, certainly. But yeah, the way to counter that is to just pick up as many skills as you can. If I get a corruption, I'm taking like every shrug it off, every true grit, um, every impervious, obviously, like it's the card that makes so many of your other cards better. Um, and it's S. And here we have another heavy hitter, Dark Embrace. Whenever a card is exhausted, draw one card. Um, Now, admittedly, if you don't have cards that exhaust, it's just kind of dead weight in your deck. And 2 energy is a lot to spend. If you upgrade it, it becomes 1 energy. Um, but yeah, if you've got corruption, I feel like a Dark Embrace is just an always take. Um, just the ability to draw more attacks. Um, After using your skills at 0 cost, or even just or drawing more skills at 0 cost is incredible. Um, yeah, what is there to say? I mean, I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory why this card is incredible. Um, don't really need to get into it. Now, demon form, I've had a bit of an arc with it. I think that in early ascensions, it can really carry you very hard. Early on, when enemies aren't doing as much damage to you and you can just sort of tank whatever they throw at you, it's not so bad. But I found that the later that I got into the ladder, the less it worked out for me when I took it. You know, it's just such an incredibly slow card, and at such high costs. I just feel like unless you're working with, you know, some serious energy relics, or you have the ability to generate more energy for yourself, it's not going to be super worth it, because I just feel like with the Ironclad, you just want to play fast, and Demon Form is such a slow build. It's like you can gain 2 or upgraded with a Demon Form plus 3 strength per turn, and obviously that becomes incredibly powerful, but it just takes a long time to get there. And by the time you start getting to, like, the really high level strength, it might just be too late. And you're sacrificing an entire turn in a lot of cases to use it. And I just found that in a lot of instances, it just wasn't as helpful as I wanted it to be. So obviously, if you have the energy to spend it, or if you have Snack OI or something like that, then like you have to take it, obviously. But um there are other ways that I think that you can build strength um that just don't handicap you to such an extent. So, it's between a B and a C. Um, I have to put it in C, unfortunately. Like I said, it's great on paper and practice. I just haven't really had that much success with it. Disarm, on the other hand, great card. It's just such an unbelievable counter to so many of the enemies in the game. It's great against boss. It's permanent strength loss. Um, I'll take it almost always. I love having multiple copies of it. I love upgrading it to 3 strength. I love using Exhume to bring it back to just make enemies weaker and weaker. At only 1 cost, it's amazing. Um, it's one of the great block solutions in the game. And like I've said time and time again, blocking is the greatest strength of the Ironclad. So yeah, disarm. You know, it's a card that I will almost always take. Double tap. Um, hmm. This is one that if you're able to um have some 0 cost attacks, like a blood for blood or a body slam, is just absolutely insane. Um Yeah, it's like you're just playing your next attack twice, upgraded, you're playing your next two attacks twice. Um, and you can just do some insane damage with it. Um, this is one that I will generally take even if I don't really have any amazing cards to go along with it, just because I feel like the potential upside later is so good. So I'm gonna put it in A for that reason. Um, yeah, and then Dropkick, that's a C for me. Deal 5 damage. If the enemy has vulnerable, gain 1 energy and draw 1 card. Now, if you have a lot of ways to draw vulnerable, like if you have a bash, if you have a thunderclap, or if you had there's one other colorless card I'm forgetting right now that I think just lets you cast vulnerable on everybody if it's upgraded. I forget what it is right now. Then yeah, this can be really good, and it does present um the potential to help you go infinite. But um if you aren't really doing a lot of vulnerable, and you're not able to use it at the right time, it's just not it's like nothing. It's just like it's worse than having a strike in your deck, because it only deals 5. So for that reason, potentially big upside, just like the other cards in this tier, but um it's just not that reliable. Dual wield. Yeah, this is another one like double tap. Um, if you're able to get a zero cost attack like a blood for blood or a body slam, then it becomes absolutely insane. Or if you have snack OI and you get like a low cost bludgeon or something like that, then it's just insanely good. Um, not always useful, but again, like double tap, it's one where I will often take it when I get it, just because if the opportunity comes around for me to be able to employ it effectively, it is like such a game changer. So I'm gonna put it in A tier. I could see some arguments maybe for this and double tap being in B tier. But again, I just think about the great runs that I've had with Ironclad, and I just feel like these cards were often part of the mix. So I can't put them lower. Entrench, though, I think belongs in B. Obviously it has the multiplicative scaling. It doubles the block that you have. It's 2 cost, which is a lot, but if you already have, 60 block with barricade, then it's obviously incredibly worth it to play. And if you upgrade it, it's 1 cost, which will let you play it earlier and more often. But you know, this is one that I usually don't take early, and I just pray that I see it in like Act 3 or something, because um it can really change your deck in a very significant way if you have sort of like the triumvirate of like barricade, corruption, and feel no pain, which we'll talk about. Um yeah, it's incredible, but not always. I've had a lot of runs where it just kind of sits in my deck, so going with B. Evolve. Now we're going to talk about statuses in this game. Um, whenever you draw a status card, draw 1 card. I'm going to put it in B. There are a lot of enemies in Slay the Spire that give you statuses. Wounds, things of that nature, burns. And there are actually a few cards that you can play that will insert statuses into your deck, like Power Through or Wild Strike. Um, And I think that if you find yourself going in a direction where you're playing those cards a lot, and Evolve can really ameliorate the downsides, the very significant downsides of adding statuses into your deck. Um, And at 1 energy, I just feel like it's worth it, you know? I won't always take it, but, you know, if I'm fighting, like, the slime boss, for example, um, I definitely will. Because, yeah, just ameliorating the impact of your hand filling up with statuses is just really nice. Exhume. A. Put a card from your exhaust pile into your hand. Ironclad has a lot of really good cards that exhaust. I love to use it with disarm. I love to use it with like an impervious, um, you know, a fiend fire, a feed. There's just, you know, a limit break. There's just so many great cards for the ironclad that exhaust that I'm almost always going to take it just because I feel like I'm going to be grateful that I did at some point down the road. I've had some really powerful decks with Exhume, you know, like having Barricade active and then exhuming an Impervious, maybe, you know, like, even an upgraded Impervious, which is 40 block. Um, it's just a great card that has definitely saved my ass time and time again. Feed, one of the few A tier, in my opinion, attack cards for the Ironclad. Um, Even just the raw damage here, one cost 10 damage is really good. I think the only other one cost card that does double digit damage, if I'm not mistaken, um, innately is Wild Strike, but that puts a wound into your draw pile. Um, and if you're able to kill an enemy with this, it raises your max HP by 3, and it exhausts, which, as we've established, is just very desirable. Um, you know, it's amazing. If you get your strength up, it's really amazing because then, you know, you can start doing bigger and bigger attacks that you're able to kill enemies with more and more often, and you're just going to get your HP up to some pretty silly levels. You know, I've had some runs where I was able to get my max HP like way up, like, you know, 120, 130, 140 HP, just by like putting up a ton of block and then, you know, sort of slow playing it and getting my feet out there at the right time, which is like one of the most fun ways to play actually. So in addition, just to its intrinsic value, it's also just a really fun card to play, which I value personally. Um, Feel no pain. Referenced it a bunch of times already. It's an S tier. Whenever a card is exhausted, you get 3 block. And there are just so many times where it's incredibly valuable. Even early on, you know, if you take it floor 1, you run into the whatever they're called, the sentinels or the sentries or whatever they are. Sort of like the trio of enemies that just put a bunch of whatever they're called, the statuses that exhaust into your deck. This is just like a hard counter to that. Because it makes it so that you just later in the fight, you just don't even have to put up hardly any block at all and you can just attack. Um, and yeah, it's an essential part of any really serious high level ironclad play, in my opinion. It's incredible. And this is one that I'll take pretty much as many copies of it as show up. Like, yeah, I'll spend another 1 energy to get, you know, another 3 or possibly 4 upgraded block. I mean, that's amazing. So, yeah, feel no pain. Just feel no pain. Corruption, Dark Embrace, Barricade, Body Slam, Double Tap, Dual Wields. Like, if you have all of these things going, it's just very hard to stop you as an Ironclad. I mean, like I said, there is no true meta for this game, but to me, some combination of those cards um, is just pretty difficult to stop. Fiendfire. Again, you'll see the word exhaust pop up 3 times in this card. I think something like 1/3 of all of the Ironclad's unique cards have the word exhaust in them. Which is like, once I realized that, I sort of was like, okay, I really need to start playing into exhaust more, you know. Because early on, like a lot of players, I was very shy about exhausting my cards because it's scary. It's like, well, what if I need them? Well, you know, the point is that exhaust is gonna make it so that the fight doesn't last as long because you can use all the auxiliary effects of it, of the exhaust mechanics. So yeah, Fiend Fire. I mean, obviously incredible. Deal 7 damage for each card exhausted. You can upgrade that to 10. If you have Runic Pyramid, this is like an absolutely insane attack. Um, just using it as like a finisher on bosses um is something that I've done many, many times. You can do some insane synergies with this, even if it's not fatal. You can use it with Feel No Pain to just gain a shitload of block. Um, if you use it right away, you can just um if you have Dark Embrace going, you can just get like a whole new hand into your deck. Just a lot of crazy stuff you can do with it. Yeah, and it's one that I will usually take. Fiend Fire is amazing. Fire Breathing. Whenever you draw a status or a curse, deal 6 damage to all enemies. Like I said, there are a lot of enemies that put statuses and curses into your deck. A lot of ways to put those things into your deck yourself. Floor 1, I love having a Fire Breathing. Um, becomes slightly less useful later on, although I believe all of the Act 3 bosses do put statuses into your deck. Um, but yeah, this is just, it's an amazing crowd control. Um, if you're able to, use like a power through to put some wounds into your deck, or um whatever it is, reckless charge, put some dazed into your draw. You're just gonna do like a shitload of passive damage. And I really like it. So yeah, again, just this B tier mostly belongs to early game cards that don't scale especially well, but are very useful early on. Fire Breathing is another one of those. Flame Barrier. A. Just a really good block card. Probably the second most valuable block card in the game. Upgrades from 12 to 16 block. Um, and it has, which is already great, by the way. But the real kicker is that if you are attacked, deal 4 damage back, which is just an insane counter against enemies that attack a lot of times. Like the birds in Act 2, um, like the stabbing book. Um, this is just an amazing card to have at any point in the game, really. Um, yeah, if you have a corruption and you're able to play this for free, it's just like, holy shit, it's so good. Flex. Uh it's another card that you need to draw at the right time for it to be good. And it also needs an upgrade to be good. Because it upgrades to 4 strength. And 2 strength is fine, but it's just not enough. It's not enough to really move the needle, even at 0 cost. It's just kind of there. I'm going to put it in C, though it does obviously have some use. I have been able to, for example, have an upgraded 4 strength flex, use it, and then use limit break to, pretty much instantly get 8 strength for 1 cost. But, you can't really rely on that as a consistent strength gain mechanism. So it's okay. Early, it's fine, but I'm never really excited to take it. So I think it goes in C. Ghostly armor. Um, yeah, that's B. It's nice. 1 cost, 10 block. Nothing to get mad at. Nothing to get too excited about either. It is ethereal, which is annoying, but again, it's like what was the other ethereal card I was looking at? Um Carnage, yeah. It's just anytime it comes up, especially early, you're pretty much gonna want to play it anyways because it is so cost efficient. But um, yeah, it's fine. Havoc, um, play the top card of your draw pile and exhaust it. Not good. This is a never take for me. I never take this card. Never excited to have it in my deck. Um, it's just easily the weakest exhaust card, and I just can't think of a lot of really strong uses for it. Like, okay, it upgrades to 0 cost. Sure, okay. And as we've established, you know, exhausting cards is good. And you can use like a headbutt or a war cry to sort of control which card is going to exhaust with Havoc. But um I don't know, at that point it's like you're spending 1, possibly 2 energy just to exhaust 1 card. Like, it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I don't really know why this card exists. Um, yeah, it's a never take for me. But speaking of headbutt, really good. 1 energy, 9 damage, very efficient. Can upgrade it to 10 damage if you want. Not really one I would upgrade though. Its main utility is this right here: put a card from your discard pile on top of your draw pile. You can do some really powerful things with this. It allows you to make sure that you draw all your really powerful cards next, and just like being able to control um the order of card draw is extremely powerful. you know Combine this with something like Battle Trance, or Burning Pact. It's just gonna be really good, and it's good throughout the entire game. It's one of your better damage dealing options to start out with. And the secondary mechanic here is just going to be very powerful potentially throughout the entirety of your run. So yeah, Headbutt. Just a great common card. Love having it. And very rarely sad to see it. Heavy Blade. Um, now this is one of the more high variance cards that you can have. If you are all in on strength, you need to have this card. I've done, upwards of 350 damage with it before, definitely. Um, but that is pretty rare because I don't really go in all in on strength very often in Ironclad. Um, so most of the time I don't take it. Um, Early I never take it really. Later on, if I have, really good strength generation, then I will take it because Um, yeah, it can be really devastating, but it's so situational that I feel like I can't really put it any higher than C for now. It's not terrible. I could see an argument for B, but yeah, it's just not really like strength the is not really what I value most about Ironclad, and you need a lot of strength for this to become good. So I'm just gonna leave it there and C for now. Hemokinesis. Um, Another HP reduction card. 15 damage though. Pretty good. Pretty good. I'm gonna give it a B. Early on, it's amazing just because you don't really have any other way to deal that much damage. with 1 energy, and 2 HP really isn't a lot. So, yeah, it's good. It's good. Immolate, best AoE card for the Ironclad. If you get this early in Act 1, you basically just win. Like, you're just winning all the way up through, the Act 1 boss. And even in Act 2, there are a lot of multiple enemy fights. A lot of the elites in Act 2 and the bosses as well are multiple enemy fights. It adds a burn into your discard. That's not the hugest deal in the world. But yeah, 2 damage, 21 damage to all, or 2 energy, 21 damage to all enemies is pretty insane. Um, yeah, even honestly, even into the late game, this is one that I think is just like good to have. Especially if you're able to, ameliorate the burns that get put into your discard pile with something like a fire breathing or evolve. Just really damn good. And also really damn good as impervious. Don't feel like I need to explain why 30 block for 2 energy is good. I mean, you think about that as, you know, 15 block per energy. That's the same as the power through here, except it doesn't put 2 wounds into your hands. So it's like you have to consider it as like the best block solution in the entire game. You upgrade it to 40 block. 10 block upgrade is also great. Pair it with barricade, exhume it, come back and just, for a quick 80 damage, like, yeah, just really good. Just a card I will almost always take. Infernal Blade. I kind of came around on this one. I think it's pretty good. Um, this is actually one that I will upgrade from time to time because it's 0 cost and it adds a random attack into your hand. Now, obviously, randomness is not the greatest thing in the world because, you could get a 0 cost bludgeon, or you could get clash. So that's a thing. But generally, you're gonna get a decent damage option for 0 cost, and it exhausts, and it's something that you can bring back with exhume potentially. It's just it's pretty good. It's fun. I enjoy it. It's not amazing, but I think it's maybe a little bit slept on. I think a lot of people don't really want to take it, but I find that I'm often happy to have it in my deck. So I'm gonna put it in B. Inflame. Real simple. You just gain 2 strength for 1 energy. Solid, not amazing. Upgrades to 3 strength. It's just one of those things that I feel like is helpful to have in your deck always. You just with Ironclad, even if you don't go all in strength, you want to have a little bit. And this is just like a low cost way to do a little bit more damage. And that's fine by me. Intimidate. Apply 1 week to all enemies. Pretty good. Pretty good. I mean, you could. I'm thinking about moving this up to A tier actually, because that's like for 0 cost, that's pretty damn good. I mean, weak is really valuable. And it upgrades to 2 week. It exhausts. Yeah, this is one that I just feel like I'm rarely sad to see it in my deck whenever I take it. I just feel like weakening enemies, especially in later ascensions where everything's just doing a ton of damage to you, just feels really nice. And the AoE, hell yeah, man, we'll take it. Iron Wave, just don't really like it that much. Yeah, like Act 1, it can be fine. But it's just one of those cards that just doesn't scale at all into the mid to late game. I feel like by Act 2, I'm already sick of it. Um, Yeah, it's like early on, yeah, you block, you attack at the same time. That's nice. But the numbers just aren't high enough to really compel you later in the run. So I'm just not going to take it, generally speaking. Like if it's the best option, I feel like something's going wrong. Let's put it that way. Juggernaut. Whenever you gain block, deal 5 damage to a random enemy. Synergizes extremely well. Obviously with Feel No Pain. Fiend Fire with, yeah, it's just like with Feel No Pain is like one of the most powerful combinations you can do. Synergizes with, things like Metallicize or um, a relic that gives you block like Orichalcum or something like that. Or a Rage, for example. 2 cost is a bit high, but in the right circumstance, this can really do some serious work. So I'm gonna put it in B. Limit Break, that's an A. Now, obviously, the one drawback to this is that you need strength already in order to double it. So by itself, it's useless. Um, excuse me. But um, if you have a little bit of strength generation with things like Inflame or Spot Weakness or Demon Form, um, yeah, this is like a game changing card. And if you upgrade it, it doesn't exhaust anymore. Um, and you can just get some really insane amounts of strength. I feel like it has to be an A for that reason. Even though it has no utility on its own, it's such an insane force multiplier that it has to be in this tier, I feel like. Oh my god. Metallicize, not a huge fan of it. At the end of your turn, gain 3 block. Like, yeah, gaining a little bit of block every turn is good, but 3 just isn't moving me that much. Um, Obviously becomes more valuable with something like Juggernaut. Um, if you have like Orichalcum and one of these, you're essentially getting just like 9 passive block every single turn, which is really nice. But yeah, I feel like this is one that I fell in love with early on, but like it's just a card that doesn't scale very much. Like 3 block in Act 3 is just like not even worth thinking about, really. So it's low tier, not awful, has its uses, but I don't really enjoy it. Offering S. I'll take this almost every single time. For 0 cost, you lose 6 HP. You gain 2 energy, you draw 3 cards, and it exhausts. So, I mean, I feel like for a lot of players, they look at this card, a lot of new players, I mean, they look at it and they're like, wow, 6 HP? That's scary. And it exhausts. I don't like that either. But, you know, you think about the fact that for 6 HP, you're gaining 2 energy. You're drawing 3 cards. It's basically like it's giving you almost an entire second turn within that turn, or like it's like 1.66 turns or whatever. Um, and like even though you're gonna lose the 6 HP, you have to think about like how much HP you might save, with these added resources into your hand. And for I mean, it's just insane. Absolutely insane. And then again, Ironclad gains back 6 HP at the end of every combat. So, just think of it that way. It's like you're basically just it pays for itself. Um, Obviously you don't want to overuse it. Um, with something like Exhume. But you can do some pretty insane stuff with offering. Yeah, Perfected Strike. Nope. I'm not. I'm tempted to put this in D, but it does have its uses. You know, early in the game, it's one of the better damage sources. In Act One, if you take a pommel strike, if you take twin strike, obviously things that have strike in the name, it's going to be pretty nuts, pretty quickly. But generally speaking, I just don't like the way that this makes you play. I feel like it disincentivizes you from removing strikes from your deck, which is just not something that is beneficial to you in the long run. Um, yeah, and speaking of strikes, pommel strike, uh, easy A. One of the best common cards for Ironclad. 1 energy, 9 damage, and card draw. An upgrade gives you 10 damage and 2 card draw. Um, I mean, it's the only card that we have that in which an upgrade gives you more damage and additional card draw. And I feel like this is like pretty good at any point in the game. Like this is one that if I take it early on, I'm just as happy to see it later. Not the best offensive option, but again, drawing more cards is incredibly good, and it's a good upgrade option. So why not? Power through. I feel like a lot of people hate this one because of the very serious drawback of adding 2 wounds into your hand, but I am of the opinion that 15 block for 1 energy and 20 block upgraded for 1 energy is just too good to pass up. And with all the different ways you have to ameliorate the effects of these wounds, the evolve fire breathing, if you have an upgraded true grit, you can exhaust the wounds. I feel like it's very worth it. This is a B tier for me. Borderline A tier, honestly. I just think that the amount of block that you get just makes it worth it. And also the fact that it adds 2 wounds into your hand, instead of your draw pile, makes it very good as well. Because you're able to you don't have to see the wounds for a little while. Um, it's just, I think it's a good card. Others might disagree. They might think the downside is too much, but I personally really enjoy it. Pummel, really good card. Deal 2 damage 4 times. Exhaust. One of the best damage cards if you have a little bit of strength. You can do some really serious amount of damage. Later ascensions, the birds take 4 hits to get down. And this does damage 4 times, so you're going to be able to spare yourself some serious pain from that. Um, and it exhausts. Yeah, just really nice. It's one that I'll pretty much always take early if I see it, so it goes in A. Rage, play an attack, gain 3 block. That's fine. If you have other 0 cost attacks, like if you have like a very like anger heavy build, for example, then I could see getting some use out of this. But again, it's like you have to draw it, and you have to draw said low cost attacks in the same turn, and 3 block just isn't really moving the needle that much. So it's okay. Nothing amazing. For me, it's a C tier. Rampage. Interesting mechanic. Potentially very good. Like on paper, could be very good. Deal 8 damage, increase this card's damage by 5 this combat. Unfortunately though, it just never really works as well as you think it's going to. Um, I feel like later in the game, you're just not getting it enough. It's not coming back into your hand and being playable often enough to really get the benefit out of it. Early on, like if you get it as like a starting reward, it can be pretty decent. But yeah, this is just it's a little bit of a trap, I feel like. Like if you are trying to like really make this do some serious work, I feel like something has gone wrong. Um Reaper, it's an A. Deal 4 damage to all enemies. Heal HP equal to unblocked damage. And it exhausts. With strength, this is insane. Um, because you can just like farm enemies for HP. You get your strength really high and you put up a lot of block and just sort of slow play it. Like you can really do a lot of healing with Reaper. Um, and you know, obviously I believe it's the only card out of the ones that we're going to talk about that lets you heal. Um, so it obviously has like incredibly high intrinsic value. And even though it's not incredible with low strength, I still feel compelled to pick it up most of the time just because, especially on multi enemy fights, this can really save your skin for sure. Reckless Charge. Um, I kind of like this card. Especially if you have, um, Feel No Pain going, maybe an Evolve or a Fire Breathing, because for 0 cost, you're doing 7 damage. You get a Dazed, which exhausts immediately and gives you block, and you can potentially do some damage with it as well. So, I'm gonna give it a C. Nothing I'm ever super excited to have, but it definitely undeniably has some interesting synergies with other cards in the deck. Um, Rupture. We've talked a lot about cards that diminish your HP, like Hemokinesis. Um, like what else? Brutality. Um, like Offering, like Combust. Whenever you lose HP from a card, gain 1 strength. This is just like a really fun way to gain strength, in my opinion. I always like taking a Rupture if I have one of these other cards in my deck, because it's sort of like it makes it so that I don't have to seriously consider or as seriously consider taking something like a demon form or something like that. I like having multiple small ways to gain strength rather than just putting all my eggs into the demon form basket. And Rupture is just like it's a fun way to go about that, in my opinion. Searing Blow, another fun card. I have done the Searing Blow build, where you just upgrade it a shitload of times because the gimmick is that you can upgrade it any number of times. Every time you upgrade it, it upgrades at a slightly higher amount. And I've had it to where I've just upgraded it like, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 times or whatever. Um, I don't know if I ever won with it, but it is a lot of fun. It's kind of like it's almost like a challenge run that you can do. Um, so yeah, not broadly useful, but I do like it. I like that it exists. It's a neat one for sure. Second Wind. Exhaust all your non-attack cards. Get 5 block for each one exhausted. Um, I think this is one of the best ways in the game to ameliorate the negative effects of Power Through and Wild Strike. It just allows you to exhaust all of those status cards and gain 5 block for them, which is really, really nice. Um, it's not as useful if you have corruption, because then you can just play all the skills instead of just flat out exhausting them for 5 or upgraded 7 block. But yeah, this is one that um I still feel good about having as a part of an exhaust deck if my hand starts to get a little bit filled up with you know, statuses and curses and things like that. It can be just a very useful solution to that. Seeing red, um yeah, one cost, gain 2 energy, exhaust. That's okay. It's fine. Um I don't think it's as good as um was it bloodletting? Um you basically have to upgrade it to make it as good as bloodletting, because it becomes a 0 cost card. Um but yeah, it's fine. It's like you're basically just you're gaining it's free 1 energy, which isn't amazing, but obviously can be very useful under the right circumstances. Same could be said for Sentinel. Um, if you have a way to target this with exhaust, like with an upgraded True Grit, um, or if you use it in conjunction with Second Wind, or Fiend Fire, then it can be really good, because you gain 2 energy right off the bat. I think upgraded you get 3 energy. So if you've got like if you're able to upgrade it with armaments or apotheosis or something like that, it's really good. I wouldn't really recommend it upgrading it at a campfire. There's probably other things that you can upgrade, but yeah, situationally can be very good. Not one that I take often. If I end up with it in my deck, through like a Pandora's box or whatever, I'm always like, okay, this could be useful. But as it is, it's just okay. Just by itself, it's not really doing anything with 1 energy and 5 blocks, so can't really have it any higher than C, certainly. Speaking of being not higher than C, Sever Soul. Exhaust all non-attack cards in your hand. Deal 16 damage. 2 energy for 16 damage is just not... Like, 16 damage is just not a good enough reward for exhausting all of your non-attack cards. You know what I mean? I feel like for this to really become interesting, you would have to do like twice that. You know what I mean? Especially for 2 energy. This is just one of those cards that, kind of like Clash in a way, where it's like if the damage values were different, like they would have to scale way higher for me to even consider taking this card. Shockwave. Apply 3 weak and vulnerable to all enemies, and it exhausts. Upgraded 5 weak and 5 vulnerable. This is one that I will almost always upgrade if I have it. And it's an A. I mean, just yeah, this is just a huge boon, especially for long fights. Like just being able to do that much more damage and take that much less damage from every single enemy on the screen is enormous. I think it's well worth the 2 energy cost most of the time. You know, it's it's great. Um, I will very seriously consider taking it pretty much no matter when it shows up. And it's an amazing card. Shrug it off. A. Um, again, just the card that I feel like I'm happy to have at any point because of the draw mechanic. 8 block, 1 draw. Just anything that draws cards, I just think is gonna be innately very useful, you know? With corruption, it gives you a lot of card draw as well. Like if I have corruption, I'm just gonna take as many shrug it offs as I can. It's like I just can't have too many, you know. It's like you're just cooking with gas at that point. Spot weakness. B. If an enemy intends to attack, gain 3 strength, upgraded 4 strength. Um, Decent strength gain card. The obvious problem with it is that you can only use it if the enemy is attacking, and if the enemy is attacking, then you also want to be playing your blocks. Um, and so you're probably not going to get the benefit of that strength for another turn. Um, which puts it a little behind the 8 ball as far as like I slightly prefer Inflame, I would say, even though it has slightly less strength gain. But certainly like this is one that can be very powerful. I don't mind having it in my deck. And it's a decent strength gain. You'll notice that pretty much all of the strength options are in B or C tier, except for Limit Break. Um, and that's just because if we're talking relatively speaking, I just think that block is more important than strength. So that's why even though things like Inflame, Spot Weakness are good, they're just not going to be as valuable to me personally. Sword Boomerang. Um, Really good. 3 damage to a random enemy 3 times. It's great early on against single enemy fights. Against multiple enemies, it has the randomness element to it, so it's not going to be as useful all the time. But it's another one that goes really well with the strength build. Obviously, anything that attacks multiple times is going to be a very good strength card. I don't like it quite as much as a similar card like Pummel, because obviously you don't get to target the damage as much. Um, it doesn't play into the exhaust mechanic, and it's deals damage fewer times. So I'm just gonna put it slightly below Pummel for that reason. Good card though. Thunderclap C can be decent as like a starting card early on because you really want to have at least one AoE option. And this does allow you to apply vulnerable to all enemies. So if you're able to like get off a vulnerable on everybody and then also hit them with a cleave or something, then you're really cooking with gas. But it's just another card that doesn't really mean much later in the game, just because 4 damage just isn't really doing anything. Um, but being able to apply vulnerable to all enemies on that particular turn is really good. I think if you were able to upgrade this and have it apply to vulnerable, then I would feel a little bit more positively about it. But as it is, it's just like sort of like a decent starting card that doesn't have much utility later. True Grit. Awesome card. Arguably needs an upgrade. Upgraded, it does 9 block, and very crucially, it allows you to target which card you want to exhaust, which is just extremely good for obvious reasons. Just allows you to have a lot more control over your exhaust builds, allows you to get statuses and curses out of your hands. I mean, yeah, this is a must have for any exhaust deck. I feel like it's one that um I just feel like I'm always happy to have in my deck just because again of just the amount of control it gives you over your deck when it's upgraded. Now granted, like it's a lot better upgraded, but even still, just exhausting one card at random, if you just try to make sure that you get the cards that you value the most out of your hand first and then play it, and then just have it exhaust like a strike or a defend, then it's still pretty good, but upgraded, it really is incredible. This is honestly like, if it started with the ability to target the exhaust, then it would be probably S tier for me. I think it's amazing. Twin Strike. Yeah, 1 cost, 10 damage, strength scaler, just a solid early attack. You take it in Act 1, and it does good work for you. If you're able to scale your strength, then it will continue to be good. If not, then it's not really that good, so that's why it ends up in the middle tier here. Uppercut. Hey, 13 damage, 1 weak, 1 vulnerable for 2 energy. Not amazing on its own. Upgraded though, you're gonna do 2 weak and 2 vulnerable, which is incredibly good. That really puts it above something like Clothesline or Bash. Speaking of which, we don't have Bash here. I wonder if that's because it's a starter card. That must be why. But yeah, Bash is another B tier probably. Yeah, an uppercut, the ability to do weak and vulnerable, um, makes it scale better into the late game for me than the other 2 cost um, cards like Clothesline and Bash that do just one of these effects and does more flat damage than both of them. So love having an uppercut in the deck. Always nice. Warcry, draw 1 card, put a card from your hand onto the draw pile. Obviously, it has some utility. I don't know, man. I just don't really feel excited about it. um, yeah, the fact that it just. I just feel like there are better options almost always whenever I'm picking a Warcry. Um, obviously, drawing card is good. At 0 cost is good. Putting a card from your hand onto the top of your draw pile is nice. Exhausting is nice. But I don't know. Maybe it's a me problem. I just feel like I haven't really gotten that much use out of this. Um, maybe, maybe it's a really good card. I don't know. I just have to investigate a little bit more. But I feel like I've just never really been stoked to have it. Whirlwind. It's an A. It's a great attack. Obviously, it's the only X attack that the Ironclad has. If you're able to build up a lot of energy, this becomes super powerful, especially upgraded. You do 8 damage to all enemies. It sort of needs the upgrade in my opinion because 5 damage isn't really that great, but 8 damage, you really start seeing the impact of it. Um, if you get like a chemical X or something like that, that increases the strength of your X cards, then this is really going to be powerful. And you can do some pretty crazy things with this plus a double tap or a dual wield. Just an amazing AoE card. If I get this early, then I'm almost always going to take it if it shows up in the card rewards. And finally, Wild Strike. Deal 12 damage. Shuffle a wound into your draw pile. Um, this is fine. 12 damage for 1 energy is good. I think it does like 15 damage upgraded. A wound into the draw pile is a little bit worse than wounds into your hand, which is what Power Through does. Just because you're very likely to see it sooner and feel the effects of it sooner. It's still okay though. I just feel like there are better attack options early. Um, because the negative impacts of having a wound in your draw pile is something that you're going to notice more early when you only have a few cards. So, for that reason, I think Wild Strike is okay. I'm not opposed necessarily to taking it, particularly if I have, again, Evolve or Fire Breathing, or the means to exhaust it, but to exhaust the wound rather. But yeah, it's an okay card. So that's going to do it. As you can see, the prevailing trend here is that the cards that focused on block and exhaust are the best cards for Ironclad. And that's been sort of a shift for me. Whereas like early on, I was just all about strength, demon form, spot weakness, and flame, limit break. That was basically what I was going for every single time. But I think at a certain point you realize that um, just trying to put up as much block as possible and gain a little bit of strength is kind of like the ideal way to play Ironclad. But of course, it's Slay the Spire, so there's no one way to win, and nothing I've said about any of the cards that I just talked about is like universally true in all circumstances. So, you know, this is just a measure of how I feel about them on average. Okay. So I am gonna do the silent climb next to Ascension 20. I'm already like halfway there, but I think I'm gonna just start again at Ascension 1 just because that sounds kind of fun. And maybe when I'm finished with that, I will do another list like this and talk a little bit about my experiences with the silent. And so that's going to do it for me. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you later.